Rain hammered down, cold and relentless. Standing outside the faded brick apartment building, Elena Carter gripped a wrinkled eviction notice in her trembling hands. The paper, already damp and smudged, might as well have been ice. Her thin jacket was soaked through. The chill bit to the bone. To 4 hours. That's all the time she had left before she and her mother would be thrown onto the streets. Inside, through thin walls, Elena could hear her mother's ragged cough, deep, painful, the sound that haunted her every night. The doctors had warned, without surgery, her mother wouldn't survive another year. The surgery they could never afford, not even with Elena working 3 miserable jobs. Her vision blurred. She was trapped, drowning. Elena Carter. The voice sliced through the downpour smooth mail. Authoritative. Elena spun around. A tall man stood beneath a sleek black umbrella. His tailored suit was untouched by the rain, his silver hair immaculately styled, polished shoes gleaming. Mr. Julian Price. He looked like he belonged to another world entirely, and everything about him, his poise, his watchful gaze, screamed money and power. "I'm Julian Price, attorney for the Sterling estate," he said, offering a business card. "My client has a proposition that could resolve your financial difficulties." Elena's stomach knotted. She'd heard of propositions from men like this, wealthy predators who preyed on desperate women. "I'm not interested in anything like that," she said sharply, turning to leave. Price's expression didn't change. $5 million, Ms. Carter, for 9 months of your life. The number struck her like a blow. 5 million. Enough to save her mother. Enough for the best care, the best surgeons, enough to change everything. Still, what was the price? "This isn't some shady backroom deal," Price continued, watching her carefully. "You'd be carrying the child of my client, Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Technologies. He's dying, stage 4 cancer. 6 months, at most. He needs an heir to secure his company's future." Alexander Sterling. The name alone left her breathless. She'd seen him on magazine covers. Powerful, untouchable, one of the richest men in the country. But he was dying, and he needed her. "Why me?" she whispered. "You're young, healthy, intelligent, and... Price's gaze flickered over her face, lingering in a way that made her uncomfortable. "You fit certain specifications Mr. Sterling requires." Another deep cough echoed from her apartment. Her mother suffering. "The procedure would be fully medical," Price continued smoothly. "No physical contact required between you and Mr. Sterling. You would live at his estate throughout the pregnancy, under constant medical care. In return, $5 million. Elena stared down at the soggy eviction notice. No job, no apartment, no hope, no time. "I need to think about it," she finally said, voice tight. Price reached into a sleek leather briefcase and handed her a thick envelope. "The contract and initial medical reports. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, my client will move on to other candidates." The envelope felt heavy in her hands, heavy with possibility and with danger. By the time she looked up, Price had vanished into the storm, alone in the rain. Elena stood motionless. Was she about to make the biggest mistake of her life? Inside, another bout of coughing tore through her mother's frail body. Elena closed her eyes. A silent promise burned in her chest. She would save her mother, whatever it took, even if it meant selling her soul. Later, in their tiny, crumbling apartment, she sat at the small kitchen table. The contract spread open before her. It was thicker than any book she'd ever read. full of cold legal terms that made her head spin, but one number was crystal clear: $5 million for 9 months. Of her life, it sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But as she watched her mother struggle to breathe, Elena knew she didn't have a choice. The Sterling estate loomed behind wrought-iron gates, towering and cold. Glass and steel stretched skyward, surrounded by manicured lawns, and gardens that looked untouched by human hands. Elena Carter's beat-up Honda sputtered to a halt in the grand circular driveway. Out of place among the sleek black luxury cars parked neatly in a row, she gripped the steering wheel, staring up at the mansion. It looked less like a home and more like a monument, sterile, imposing, designed to impress and intimidate. $5 million, she thought again, the number echoing in her mind. It could save her mother. The image of her mother's frail body and labored breathing flashed through her. That was all that mattered. Elena forced herself to step out into the cool morning air. Before she could even raise a hand to knock, the door opened silently. A woman in a sharp navy uniform greeted her. With a small nod, "Miss Carter," the woman said, her tone formal and without warmth. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Please, follow me." Elena followed her across gleaming marble floors. The house was eerily quiet. No footsteps, no voices. Only the soft click of the housekeeper's heels echoed through long, cold corridors, lined with abstract, soulless art. The entire place felt more like a museum than a home. Finally, they reached a pair of tall doors. The housekeeper knocked once and pushed them open. "This way," the woman said simply. Sunlight streamed through massive windows, casting long beams of light across a study lined with bookshelves. Unlike the rest of the house, this room felt different, almost human. Rich, dark wood, leather-bound volumes, worn chairs. A place where someone actually lived. Behind a massive desk sat Alexander Sterling. Elena froze. He looked so different from the photos she'd seen in magazines. He was still striking, with sharp features and deep-set grey eyes, but sickness had carved deep hollows in his cheeks. His skin was pale, stretched thin over the bones of his face. The tailored suit he wore seemed too large for his diminished frame. Slowly, Sterling stood, bracing himself with one hand on the desk. "Miss Carter," he greeted her, his voice low, roughened by illness. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Sterling," Elena replied, her voice unsteady as she took the seat he gestured toward. "I assume you've read the contract," said Sterling, easing himself carefully back into his chair. "Most of it," Elena admitted. "I tried. It's very detailed." A faint, tired smile touched the corners of his mouth. "My lawyers are nothing if not thorough," he said. "Do you have any questions?" She did dozens, but one stood out, louder than the rest. "Why me?" Elena asked quietly, her gaze meeting his. Sterling regarded her for a long moment, as if weighing what to reveal. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said at last. "Someone strong. Someone who refused to give up, no matter what life threw at her." The raw honesty in his tone caught her off guard. "Your wife?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop herself. A flicker of pain crossed Sterling's features. He shook his head. "I've never married," he said. "I made other choices, perhaps mistakes." For a moment, the powerful CEO seemed almost fragile. Then, with a subtle shift in his posture, the walls came back up. "You would live here," he continued briskly. "Your own wing, full privacy. The best doctors, everything provided." The process is medical, no personal interaction required. And you? Asked Elena, her voice soft. I will be here as well, said Sterling, eyes cold once again. But this is business, Miss Carter. Nothing more. Elena's chest tightened. The man whose child she might carry seemed determined to keep an impossible distance. What happens after the baby is born? She asked. You complete the terms of your contract, said Sterling flatly. You'll leave. The child will remain here, raised by professionals, prepared to inherit the company. You will have no further obligations. No obligations. No contact. No part in the child's life. Elena's pulse quickened. Could she really do that? She swallowed hard. I need to ask ... about your health, she said carefully. The contract mentions treatments. A shadow passed through Sterling's eyes. His jaw clenched. The prognosis is poor, he said simply. 6 weeks, perhaps 8. The treatments may slow things down, but they will not reverse what has already been done. The words hung heavy between them. A man fighting to secure a future he might never see. I'll need time to think, said Elena softly. Sterling nodded. Of course, but I am not a man with time to spare. If you accept, it must be soon. Her heart pounded as she rose. Thank you, she said quietly. Good day, Miss Carter, Sterling replied, already turning back to the papers on his desk. The drive home blurred past in a haze of thoughts. Elena's mind spun with what she'd seen. Alexander Sterling was not the cold machine she'd expected. Not a monster. Not even the empire builder from the headlines. He was a man trying desperately to hold on to a future for his company, for the people who depended on him, for a child who didn't yet exist. But could she do it? Could she agree to this, carry his child and walk away? She pulled into the hospital parking lot and looked at the looming building. Her mother needed the surgery. There was no other way. And sometimes, Elena thought, as she stepped out of the car, life didn't offer choices, only consequences. The days passed in a strange blur. Elena had expected her time at the Sterling estate to feel clinical, businesslike. And in many ways, it did. Every part of her schedule was carefully planned. Meals prepared by a personal chef, daily visits from a private nurse, vitamins delivered at precise times. 3 days after signing, the IVF procedure was completed. The process had been fully clinical, exactly as promised. No contact with Alexander Sterling himself. The medical team assured her everything had gone smoothly by the end of the first week. Elena received confirmation from Dr. Zhang, the lead physician. You're pregnant, Dr. Zhang said with a professional smile. Everything looks excellent. Elena nodded, her heart thudding. The first phase was complete. The reality of it settled over her. She was carrying Alexander Sterling's child. She thought he might say something, send a message, a polite congratulations, perhaps. But days passed with no word. It was as though Sterling had vanished from the estate entirely. The wing where Elena lived remained peaceful but eerily quiet. She saw only Mrs. Whittaker and the occasional doctor. The estate itself felt endless, one hallway blending into the next dot. Elena spent her mornings in the gardens, one of the few places she could escape the suffocating stillness of the mansion. The roses were in full bloom, vibrant pinks and reds, swaying in the breeze. One afternoon, as she wandered among the rose bushes, she heard a sudden, violent coughing fit. The sound echoed from behind a marble fountain. Elena hurried toward it. Alexander Sterling was there, bent over, one hand pressed to the stone. His frame shook with each spasm. Dark red flecks stained the white handkerchief in his hand. Mr. Sterling, Elena called softly, uncertain if her presence would be welcome. Sterling straightened slowly, clearly struggling for breath. Miss Carter, he said, voice hoarse. I didn't expect anyone out here. You're not well, said Elena, moving toward him despite herself. I'm fine, Sterling replied quickly, though his pale complexion said otherwise. Just ... a side effect of treatment. An awkward silence settled between them. Elena hesitated. Then she spoke, her voice gentle. The gardens are beautiful, she said. Your mother designed them, didn't she? Sterling blinked, as if surprised by the comment. She did, he answered after a pause. She loved roses. Always said they reminded her that beauty could come from struggle. She sounds like a wise woman, Elena said quietly. Sterling's expression softened. She was. For a brief moment, the distance between them seemed to fade. But then he straightened, putting space between them once more. I should let you enjoy your walk, he said curtly. Another wave of coughing seized him before he could turn. Without thinking, Elena stepped forward and offered her arm for support. You don't have to pretend, she said softly. Not with me. For a moment, Sterling leaned against her. His body felt fragile beneath the weight of his expensive suit. Thank you, he murmured, voice low. But this is complicated. A business arrangement, nothing more. He stepped back, adjusting his coat with trembling hands. Elena watched him walk away, her heart tight. She had seen behind the cold mask, if only for a moment. Later that night, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The rawness in his eyes, the loneliness beneath his controlled exterior. Sterling might pretend this was all business, but Elena knew otherwise now. The next few days passed quietly. Elena's routine remained unchanged: doctor visits, meals, solitude, but something had shifted. Fresh flowers began appearing in her rooms each morning. Her favorite tea, mentioned once in passing, was now always available. Mr. Sterling notices things, Mrs. Whittaker said one afternoon with a knowing smile as she brought Elena a tray of soup. It wasn't much. Small gestures. But they meant something. Late one evening, unable to sleep, Elena wandered the halls. Pregnancy insomnia was becoming her constant companion. Passing by the study, she noticed the door slightly ajar. Inside, Sterling sat alone. At his desk, the dim blue light of a computer screen illuminating his tired face. Without thinking, Elena knocked lightly. Couldn't sleep either, she asked, stepping just inside. Sterling looked up, startled. The shadows beneath his eyes seemed deeper tonight. Miss Carter, he said, voice rough. I didn't hear you. I was looking for something to read, Elena said. Didn't mean to interrupt. She hesitated, but something in his expression, a wariness deeper than the sickness, kept her rooted. Are you working? She asked softly. Sterling gave a bitter laugh. Trying to, he said. Though some nights, it feels like trying to stop the tide with my hands. Elena crossed the room, drawn by the honesty in his tone. You've built something incredible, she said. Your company, your work, it helps so many people. He shook his head. It won't matter if it dies with me. The board is already circling. Without an heir, everything will be carved up and sold. The weight of his words settled heavily between them. Elena sat in the chair across from him. That's what this really is about, she said gently. The baby, the legacy. Sterling met her gaze. Yes, he said quietly. It's the only thing I can leave behind now. For the first time, Elena truly understood. This wasn't about power or greed. It was about holding on to something, anything. The face of death. She hesitated, then asked, "What made you build all this?" Sterling leaned back, his expression softening. "I grew up poor," he said simply. "My mother worked nights, cleaning offices, bought me my first computer with tip money." He smiled faintly. "I wanted to create something that would help others, something that would outlast me." For the first time, Elena saw the man beneath. The headlines. The one who had built an empire not just for profit, but out of love for the woman who had raised him. She smiled. She would be proud. She said softly. Sterling looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hope so." A long silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, simply full of unspoken understanding. Finally, Sterling stirred. "You should get some rest," he said. "So should you," Elena replied gently, as she rose to leave. Their eyes met. The connection was undeniable now. No longer just business. Elena walked back to her rooms with her heart racing. Everything was changing. A week passed, then 2 nights blurred into days, and Elena found herself drifting into an odd rhythm inside the estate. The isolation still pressed in around her, but it no longer felt quite so empty. Every evening, unable to sleep, Elena returned to the study. She would find Alexander there, hunched over his laptop, working through the night as if sheer force of will could stop the inevitable. And gradually, the conversations between them grew longer. The formal distance began to fade. They spoke about more than the company, about music, about books, about the childhoods neither of them wanted to revisit too closely. In those quiet hours, Alexander seemed different. No longer the cold CEO, no longer just the employer she'd signed a contract with. He was simply a man, holding on to life in the only way he knew how. One evening, Elena found him seated by the fireplace. He looked exhausted, dark circles deepening beneath his eyes. "You should rest," Elena said softly as she entered the room. Alexander shook his head. "If I stop, if I slow down, I won't be able to start again," he said quietly. She hesitated, then sat beside him. "You can't fight death with spreadsheets," she said gently. He gave a faint smile. "No," he agreed, "but maybe I can leave something behind worth remembering." They sat in silence for a moment. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then Alexander spoke again, his voice low. "Do you regret it?" he asked, "signing the contract?" Elena considered the question carefully. "No," she said at last. "Not when I think about my mother. She's scheduled for surgery next week. Without this, without you, she wouldn't have had a chance." Alexander looked down, the flames reflected in his tired eyes. "Good," he said softly. "That's something." Another pause. The room felt warmer than usual. Elena spoke again, hesitating. "What about you?" she asked. "Do you regret this arrangement?" He exhaled, a long breath that seemed to carry the weight of years. "I regret that it came to this," he admitted. "That I spent so long building an empire and forgot to build a life." There was no bitterness in his tone, only quiet sorrow. The conversation stayed with Elena long after she returned to her room that night. She lay awake, one hand resting lightly over her stomach. The child inside her would grow up, never knowing this version of Alexander Sterling, the man beneath the public image, the man who had once wanted a family, if only things had been different. The next morning, she received a message from Julian Price. Alexander wished to meet her in the study at noon. Elena arrived on time, her nerves tight. Sterling stood by the window, gazing out over the gardens. The light framed him in sharp contrast, strength and fragility all at once. When he turned, his face was serious. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. "Something I should have told you before any of this began." Stomach twisted. "What is it?" she asked. Sterling hesitated, searching for words. "6 months ago," he began, "before my diagnosis, I attended a charity gala at the children's hospital." Elena blinked. The mention of the hospital struck a chord. "I remember," she said. "I was working that night, volunteering." Sterling nodded slowly. "I stepped outside during the event," he continued. "I wasn't in the mood for crowds. That's when I saw you. You were in the garden, reading." A memory stirred sharp and vivid. The man she had met in the garden. The stranger with tired eyes and quiet sadness. They had spoken for what felt like hours, about books and life and the unfairness of the world. "You," Elena breathed. "That was you." Sterling's voice dropped. "I never forgot that night," he said. "When my team later began searching for potential surrogates, I saw your name on the hospital volunteer roster. I convinced myself it was coincidence, that you met the criteria, but the truth is, I chose you because I remembered you." Elena's breath caught. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over her. "You should have told me," she whispered. "I know," said Sterling, guilt plain in his voice. I thought I could keep this professional, that it would protect you, but that wasn't honest, and I'm sorry." Elena's heart pounded. The man she had unknowingly remembered, the man who had seemed so distant when they first met again in the study, had already known her, already chosen her. "You lied," she said quietly. "Yes," Sterling admitted, "and I regret it." She turned away for a moment, struggling to steady her thoughts. "But everything I've said to you these past weeks," Sterling continued, voice raw, "has been real. That night in the garden, it mattered to me, more than I wanted to admit." Elena faced him again, emotions swirling in her chest. "What do you want from me now?" she asked. Sterling's expression shifted. For the first time since they'd met, there was no mask, only vulnerability. "I want to live," he said simply. "I want to see my child born. I want a chance to be more than a name on a contract." A beat passed. Then he added, his voice steady despite the tremor beneath it, "I've decided to pursue an aggressive new treatment. It's risky, but if there's even a small chance, it might give me more time. I have to try." Elena's breath caught. "How risky?" she asked softly. Sterling looked away. 40% chance of success," he said. 60% chance. It could kill me faster." The room seemed to tilt. The idea of losing him so soon before the child was even born made Elena's chest ache. "I need to know," Sterling said quietly, meeting her eyes. "If I do this, will you stay? Not because of obligation, but because you choose to." Elena stared at him, heart racing. She could walk away. She had every right. But somehow, despite everything, the thought of leaving now felt impossible. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll stay." Relief flickered in his eyes. For a moment, the distance between them seemed to vanish entirely. "Thank you," he said softly. Elena stepped closer, unable to fight the pull between them. "But if you survive this," she added, voice firm, "we are going to have a very serious talk about honesty." A faint smile touched Sterling's lips. Agreed. They stood in the quiet study, something new and fragile blooming between them. The risk ahead was enormous, But for the first time, they were in this together. 2 days later, Alexander was admitted to a private medical facility attached to the estate. The treatment would be brutal. Weeks of intensive chemotherapy combined with targeted radiation. Elena insisted on being there when Julian. Price suggested she might be more comfortable staying in the estate during the worst of it. Alexander shook his head. "She's staying," he said firmly. "If anyone has a problem with that, they can leave." Elena moved into a small room down the hall from his. It wasn't part of the contract. It wasn't part of the plan. But none of that mattered anymore. The first week of treatment hit Alexander hard. He lost weight rapidly. His hair began to thin. The coughing fits became more violent. Some nights he was barely conscious, but every time Elena entered the room, he fought to stay awake. "Talk to me about the baby," he whispered between treatments, voice cracked and thin. "Tell me what you think she'll be like." Elena would sit beside him, holding his hand. "She'll be strong," she said softly, "like you, and stubborn, I think." Alexander gave a faint smile. "She changed the world," Elena added. "You'll see." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Promise me," he murmured. "Promise me you'll tell her everything, even if—" Elena shook her head. "Don't say it," she whispered. "You're going to meet her. I won't accept anything less." The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and worry. Elena spent her time moving between her room and Alexander's. Mrs. Whittaker brought her meals, but most remained untouched. Every morning, Elena checked with Dr. Jong for updates. "There are some early signs of progress," the doctor said cautiously one morning, "but we won't know for certain for another week." Elena nodded, clinging to hope. The second week began, harsher than the first. Alexander's body weakened further. The man who had once dominated boardrooms could barely lift a glass of water, but still, he fought. Late one night, after a particularly difficult treatment, he opened his eyes to find Elena sitting silently at his bedside. "You should sleep," he whispered. "I'm not leaving you," Elena replied. He managed a small smile. "Stubborn," he said, "just like our daughter." The next morning, news of Alexander's condition spread beyond the estate. Julian Price arrived, tight-lipped and tense. "The board is moving," he told Elena quietly in the hallway. "They believe Mr. Sterling won't survive the month. They've called an emergency meeting." Elena's heart sank. "They can't do anything yet," she said. "They'll try," said Price. "His half-brother Nathan, he's already making calls. He wants control." Elena's pulse quickened. "What about the contract?" she asked. "The baby?" "If Mr. Sterling dies before the birth," Price said, voice grim, "the contract becomes void. Legally, Nathan could attempt to challenge everything." Elena's stomach twisted. She couldn't let that happen. Later that afternoon, while Alexander slept, Elena called a number she never thought she would use. "Elizabeth Hawthorne," came the cool voice on the other end. "I need your help," Elena said. "I think they're coming for him." By the third week, Nathan Sterling arrived at the medical facility. He stormed into the private wing with 2 lawyers in tow. "This is madness," Nathan declared, barging into Alexander's room without knocking. "You're killing yourself with these treatments. And for what? A child with no standing? This ends now." Elena stood from her chair at Alexander's bedside. "You have no right to be here," she said, her voice sharp. Nathan's cold gaze swept over her. "I have every right," he said. "My brother is no longer fit to run this company, and this arrangement," he sneered, "is an embarrassment." Alexander stirred weakly, forcing himself upright. "Nathan," he rasped, Get out." Nathan ignored him. "The board has voted," Nathan continued. "I'll be taking control immediately. And as for you, Miss Carter," his eyes narrowed, "you'll receive a settlement to leave quietly. 1 million. Take it and disappear." Elena's hands moved protectively over her stomach. "This is Alexander's child," she said fiercely. "She has rights." Nathan laughed coldly. "A fetus has no legal standing," he said. "And you're just a surrogate." "Wrong," came a new voice from the doorway. Elizabeth Hawthorne entered the room, her sharp suit impeccable. 2 of her own lawyers followed behind. "Who the hell are you?" Nathan demanded. "Elizabeth Hawthorne," she replied calmly. "Retained counsel for Miss Carter. And before you say anything else, I suggest you read these." She handed Nathan a thick stack of legal documents. "Injunctions," she said, "preventing any action against Mr. Sterling's leadership or Miss Carter's contract." Nathan's face darkened as he skimmed the pages. "You can't do this." "I already have," Elizabeth said smoothly. "And if you push this further, we will file additional suits. Harassment, coercion, damages. I trust you know what that would mean for your personal finances." Nathan's mouth tightened. "This isn't over," he snapped, turning on his heel and storming from the room. Silence settled. Alexander leaned back against the pillows, exhausted. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. Elena moved to his side. "We're not going to let them take this from you," she said quietly. "From us." He met her gaze, a faint smile breaking through the weariness. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "That's not your choice to make." Elena replied softly. A day later, Dr. Jong entered with cautious hope in her voice. "The latest blood work shows significant improvement," she told them. "Cancer markers are down. White cell count is stabilizing." Elena's breath caught. "It's working?" she asked. Dr. Jong nodded. "It's early, but yes, the treatment is working." For the first time in weeks, Alexander smiled, truly smiled. "We might just win this," he whispered. Elena took his hand in hers. "We will," she said, "together." 6 weeks later, the house no longer felt cold. The treatments were over. Alexander had grown stronger with each passing day, the color returning slowly to his face. His steps, once unsteady, were surer now. The man who had nearly wasted away before her eyes was beginning to come back to life. Elena stayed through it all. The contract no longer mattered, neither did the original terms. There was no business between them now, only what they had chosen to build together. Her pregnancy had reached the 2nd trimester. The baby, their daughter, was growing stronger. The heart beat clear and steady on every scan. One bright afternoon, Elena sat with Alexander in the gardens, surrounded by blooming roses. She "Love these," Elena said softly, running her hand over the velvety petals. "When she's old enough." Alexander smiled faintly. "My mother would have made sure of that," he replied. They sat in companionable silence, the late summer sun warming the space between them. Later that week, during a regular checkup, Dr. Jung offered them a choice. "We can tell you the gender now," she said. Elena looked to Alexander. "What do you think?" she asked. Alexander's throat tightened. "Yes," he whispered. "I'd like to know." The doctor smiled. "Congratulations," she said. "You're having a daughter." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alexander reached out, brushing his fingers lightly over Elena's hand. "A daughter," he said softly, wonder and something deeper in his voice. Tears shimmered in Elena's eyes. She's going to be so loved, she whispered in the weeks that followed. The changes between them deepened. Alexander was no longer just the man behind the contract, and Elena was no longer just the surrogate, carrying his child. They had become something else entirely. Partners, friends, something more, though neither of them dared speak it aloud. One evening, after a quiet dinner in the estate's private dining room, Alexander asked her to walk with him. They wandered the halls of the house slowly, Alexander's strength still building. "I've made arrangements," he said at last. "For us to move?" Elena blinked. "Move?" she asked. "This house," Alexander said, voice low, "it's not a home. It never was. I want something better for her. For you." Elena's heart quickened. "What do you mean?" she asked. Softly, "There's a smaller house," Alexander said, "outside the city, warm, quiet, a place for a family. If you'll come with me." Elena stopped walking, her breath caught. "This isn't just business anymore, is it?" she asked, voice trembling. Alexander turned to face her. "It stopped being business the moment you chose to stay," he said simply. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Elena nodded. Double quotes, "Yes," she whispered. "I'll come with you, eh?" Week later, they moved. The new house was everything the estate had never been. Sunlight streamed through open windows. Wooden floors creaked softly beneath their feet. The rooms smelled of lavender and fresh paint. Alexander watched Elena walk through the space, her eyes shining. "This," she said softly, "this feels like home." Alexander reached for her hand. "It is," he said. Their days settled into a new rhythm. Elena prepared for the baby's arrival. Alexander took on fewer company calls, focusing instead on rest, recovery, and preparing to become a father. Then, 3 weeks before the due date, the baby came. It was early, too early, but strong. The labor was fast and intense. Alexander never left Elena's side, holding her hand, his voice steady in her ear through every contraction. "You're not alone," he whispered. "I'm here." Hours later, their daughter entered the world, wailing and fierce. The nurses handed the small, perfect bundle to Elena first. Then, with tears in his eyes, Alexander took her in his arms. "She's perfect," he said softly, voice shaking. They named her Isabella Marie Sterling. In that moment, everything changed. The days that followed were a blur of feedings, soft cries, and quiet moments between the three of them. Alexander held Isabella every chance he got. No longer the dying man clinging to a legacy. Now a father, determined to give his daughter a life filled with love. Elena watched him with awe. "You're incredible with her," she said one afternoon as they sat together on the couch, Isabella asleep in Alexander's arms. He looked down at the tiny face nestled against his chest. "She saved me," he said quietly. "You both did." That winter, they married. It wasn't grand or public, just a small ceremony in the garden of their new home. No photographers, no media, only a few close friends, Dr. Jong and Mrs. Whitaker standing as a witness. Elena wore a simple white dress. Alexander stood tall beside her, holding Isabella in his arms. When the vows were spoken, there was no doubt. This was no longer a business arrangement. It hadn't been for a long time. They were a family. Later that night, as Isabella slept in her crib, Alexander and Elena sat together by the fire. "You've changed everything," Alexander said quietly, his arm around her. "So, have you?" Elena replied. The old fear still lingered, of course. The cancer could return, life could shift again. But for now, they had this: a daughter, a marriage, a home, and a future they had built. Against all odds, spring came early that year. The sunlight poured through the windows of their home, warming the nursery where Isabella lay in her crib, sleeping soundly. Elena stood by the rocking chair, watching her daughter with a soft smile. Her hand rested on the edge of the crib, fingers brushing the soft blanket. So much had changed in such a short time. 6 months ago, she could never have imagined this life: a quiet home, a healthy daughter, a husband who had defied every expectation, every prognosis. Alexander entered the room quietly, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He crossed to Elena and kissed her cheek before offering her one. "She's been asleep for almost 3 hours," he whispered. Elena smiled. "She has your focus," she said. "Treat sleep like a project to finish." Alexander chuckled softly and sat beside her in the second rocking chair. For a moment, they sat in silence, watching Isabella breathe. The soft rise and fall of her tiny chest was the most peaceful thing Elena had ever seen. Then Alexander spoke. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, his voice low. "The way we started, I mean, the contract, the deception, all of it." Elena considered the question carefully. "I regret that you didn't just ask me for coffee," she said finally, a smile tugging at her lips. "Would have been much simpler." Alexander let out a soft laugh. "But no," she continued, "I don't regret anything that brought us here. Not after everything we've built together." Relief showed in his eyes. "I know I made mistakes," he said. "I'll spend the rest of my life making up for them." "You already have," Elena replied softly. "Every day, every choice you make for us, for her." Isabella stirred then, her little face scrunching as she made soft noises. Alexander rose and lifted her with practiced ease, cradling her gently in his arms. "Good morning, beautiful girl," he murmured. Elena watched them, her heart full. Alexander glanced over. "I spoke to Dr. Jong this morning," he said. "She called with my latest test results." Elena's breath caught. The fear never truly left her. "And?" she asked softly. Alexander smiled. "No signs of cancer," he said. "She says I'm officially in long-term remission." Tears filled Elena's eyes. She stood and wrapped her arms around him and Isabella. "We have a future," she whispered. "A long one," Alexander said, holding them both close. Later that afternoon, after they'd put Isabella down for her nap, Alexander brought out a small stack of papers and handed them to Elena. She looked at them, puzzled. "What's this?" she asked. "Adoption papers," he said softly. "For you, for Isabella." Elena stared at him, but ... "We're married now," she said. "I'm her mother." Alexander nodded. Double quote, "Yes, in every way that matters. But legally ... your rights are still defined by the original contract. If something happened to me, I want no one to ever question that you are her mother, in every way, equal in all things." Elena blinked back tears as she read over the documents. "You really thought of everything," she whispered. Alexander took her hands. "You deserve to be her mother in every way possible," he said, "and she deserves to have you. No legal loopholes, no old contracts hanging over us." Without hesitation, Elena signed the papers. "Yes," she said, 1,000 times yes. That evening, as they sat on the couch with Isabella between them, Alexander pulled out a leather-bound photo album. "I've been working on this," he said, opening it. Inside were photos from the past months. Isabella's first days, their wedding, the new house. Pictures of Elena's mother, now healthy, holding her granddaughter with tears in her eyes. Alexander turned the pages slowly. I want her to know everything, he said. Even how it started. The whole story. Elena leaned against him. When she's old enough, she said. We'll tell her. Alexander nodded. We'll tell her that I was a scared, stubborn man, he said, and that her mother was the bravest woman I'd ever met. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to Isabella's soft breathing. Elena smiled, and if she asks, Elena said softly, if we would have found each other without that contract. Alexander looked at her and smiled. We tell her. That love always finds a way, he said, one way or another. Later that night, as they settled into bed, Alexander held Elena close. Thank you, he whispered. For what? She asked. For saying yes to something impossible, he said. For staying when it got complicated. For fighting for us. For giving me a family I never thought I'd have. Elena kissed him softly. Thank you, she whispered, for choosing me, even if you did it in the most complicated way possible. Alexander smiled against her hair. I choose you again, he said. In every lifetime, in every world. From the nursery, they heard Isabella stir and make a small, contented noise. They smiled together in the dark, knowing that their story, which had begun with a contract, would now continue with love, strong enough to overcome anything.